Well, when you get to a Wednesday in September and you start to look ahead to the start of training camp, preseason, and all that goes into getting ready for the regular season, time to look back at some of the things that could have happened, maybe should have happened, would have happened in Sixers history. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Podcast, along with Derek Bodner. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna here producing, as always, many of you in the chat. And we can't wait to get this one going because it's going to be a fun one, discussing as we begin a new series for the rest of the summer. We'll see how things go going forward, but it was something that we definitely wanted to do for the rest of the summer on Wednesdays, a What If Wednesday. And we look back at some things in Sixers history, some more recent, maybe some going a little bit further back. But right now, we're going to start just a few years ago in 2017, looking back at a player who we've discussed this summer because of his free agent situation right now, coming off of finishing his 5th season with the Orlando Magic. Before that, he was a 2017 number 1 overall pick for the Philadelphia 76ers, and that is one Markelle Fultz, who is still out there, still available, not on anyone's roster. And quite frankly, all 4 of us, Bree included, have been surprised that he has not been snatched up by a team and added to a roster because of his age, his ability on defense. He can still run a team. He is still fearless getting to the rim, but we're guessing that maybe some of the shooting woes and the issues there are certainly a problem for Markelle Fultz. And one more thing before we get to Derek's opening thoughts. The Sixers do have an open roster spot. Now, they have a bunch of guards. We know Tyrese Maxey. You add Kelly Oubre if you want in there, but Kyle Lowry, Reggie Jackson, Jarrett McCain, they have guards. They may not need Markelle Fultz, but they do have an open roster spot. So with it, him being available, going back, what if, Derek, it's an interesting start to a what if conversation of what if Markelle Fultz? Your turn.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to try to make this one as least depressing as humanly possible. And because I really want to play more of like an alternate reality domino effect kind of game,
100%.
How that would have impacted all the moves that came after that, and less so about, really just dwelling on the fact that Markelle was so much hype did not work out. It's going to be tough to completely avoid a little bit of the, I don't want to call it pessimism, but just natural state of like, man, I really wish this would have gone a different way, but we're going to try to steer it in a different direction. And this was a trade. Obviously the Sixers gave up a lot to move up from the 3rd pick up to the 1st. They gave up another draft pick. I think it was it the Lakers draft pick that they gave up? I think it was a protected Lakers draft pick.
Yes,
that they gave up. It was pretty highly coveted. It ended up not being all that great of a pick. I think it ended up being, I think it was the 10th pick that they passed on your cousin for, or drafted your cousin, traded your cousin with. I think it ended up being that pick, which... No, it wasn't, because they still had that pick. It was I should know this off the top of my head. What was the pick that they traded away in the Markelle Fultz trade? It was a Kings pick, maybe? Kings pick?
Is that the Kings pick that everybody was talking about? The Kings pick that everyone was discussing?
I think it was a Kings pick. But anyway, it ended up being, I think, like a mid-teens pick that had a lot of trade value still. And that's really what it was the opportunity cost of not using that pick in a different trade that ended up hurting them more so than what that pick eventually became. But they gave up a lot to go up a guy that they thought would be a really good fit. Next, a really good fit with Joel Embiid, because Markelle Fultz had so much shot creation off the dribble. He really did have an incredible pull-up jumper, which is hard to believe right now. And they knew with Ben Simmons that they needed somebody who could really create off the dribble like that, who could really play in a pick-and-roll game with Joel Embiid, who could really, was just a threat to score and to run the offense like that. So I think it made a lot of sense to pursue someone of that ilk. And I remember scouting him coming out of Washington, and he really liked the combination of athleticism and size and that pull-up jumper. And it wasn't just like it was a pure jump shot. He made a lot of really tough, difficult shots at Washington. He had to, in part because they didn't have a lot of talent and they relied on him, but he was really good making contested pull-up jumpers, which is why him losing it like he did was so stark.
And it wasn't just mid-range. He would do that on the pull-up from behind the three-point line. Yes.
And I just remember thinking, like, man, if this kid works out, he is exactly what Joel Embiid needs. Now, I think some people will say, they drafted Markelle first overall in 2017. they eventually traded Markelle for the pick that became Tyrese Maxey. So some people will look at that and say, well, maybe it was a good thing because you ended up getting a player in Maxey who's a realized version of the potential that you hoped Markelle would have. A little bit different of an athlete. I think Markelle was more of a vertical athlete. Yeah. Markelle was certainly bigger, and I think could hold up better defensively.
Yep.
But Tyrese became a shooter that was, I think, exceeded even what you expected out of Markelle. So you could talk yourself into this turned out to be a good thing. But I think where I would start is just that you get an extra 3 years, an extra 4 years, because when Maxey came in as a 21st pick, they weren't built, even after they selected him in 2020, they weren't building the team around him because they just didn't know what they had yet. So you had 3 to 4 years of if, Markelle would have popped and been that very obvious centerpiece next to Joel Embiid, you could then spend the next 3 to 4 years trying to acquire complementary pieces that would fit the Paul George. You could have gone out and acquired a Paul George type, but with more resources at your disposal earlier in Joel Embiid's aging curve, and probably crucially earlier in the whatever wing you were trying to acquire earlier in his career. So now when we're sitting here and we're talking about like maybe a 2 or a 3 or maybe even a 4-year window if everything goes perfectly, you could have been talking about a 7 or 8 year window. Yep. And that to me, even more so than where they ended up, because I think where they ended up right now with Embiid, Maxey, and Paul George is a really good 3-man group. The loss of Markelle Fultz more than anything is A, the loss of resources, and B, the loss of time.
And then you look at the domino effect as you talk about. After that, what is it? Josh Richardson type of 2-guard play. Look at some of the other guys at the 2-guard spot that they tried to fill out to replace what you wanted him to be. I remember, number one, I remember where I was when it happened. Do you remember where you were when the trade went down?
I think I was at a Phillies. Weren't we at a Phillies game? No, I think I was at a Phillies game.
Yeah, I was across the street.
Okay.
At the center doing Daily News Live at the time.
I think I did a hit from the Phillies game.
Yeah, I was doing Daily News Live at the time, and it broke while I was doing Daily News Live. And then they had to have an extra programming going after. So I stayed another hour with some of my buddies over there just discussing it. And at that time, if you remember, they were sitting at the number 3 pick that Derek talked about already. And with it, that number 3 pick, there was a big discussion of not just Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, could he fall to number 3? Then it became very evident that the Lakers were going to take him. Then you started to look at, well, how about De'Aaron Fox? I was a big Dennis Smith Jr. fan. How about Josh Jackson? Was that the trade? I don't remember if that was the one, but just because they all kind of run together at that point.
I don't think so.
Where it was just so many guys at that point. But the De'Aaron Fox one was a big one.
Yeah.
Jamal Murray. The year before with Ben Simmons, that was one at that time where so many people were going back and forth and how do you go about it? But I just remember saying, I understood why they did it. You had Ben Simmons the year before. You needed another guard in the backcourt, not just for Joel Embiid, but with Ben Simmons because of the limitations that we were already hearing about him not shooting the basketball, seeing at LSU where he did not do it, despite the fact that JC, my good buddy James Clark, was his trainer, and he had him shooting, both he and DeJounte Murray working him out. And it was like, all right, he's going to shoot the basketball. But you still needed a young guard or a bigger guard to go with him that could be the secondary ball handler, handle the rock for him, shot creation, and the shooting that Derek is talking about at Washington, where he started to rise at DeMatha High School in D.C. and looking at the guy that he was as a player to get to that number 1 spot, go to Washington, produce for that school, for that team, knowing that, as Derek pointed out, there weren't a lot of players on that group that you looked at and said, yeah, he's got a lot of help. He had Division I players with him, but they weren't that helpful for what you needed. So for him to skyrocket to being that number 1 overall pick, and for many, the consensus, and still having that conversation about Jason Tatum and so many others, you just needed it to work. Then we go to the workout. Sixers have the workout. Since we go with the timeline, Sixers have the workout. It was a Saturday. This we remember together.
Yeah.
This was a Saturday, folks. They bring them in. It's like 5:30 in the evening. We go to the practice facility in Camden, where only the practice facility should be, not the actual arena. And we get the chance to watch a good portion of his workout, fresh out of the SUV. His mom is there. His trainer was there. And he goes out and he works out, Derek. and it wasn't good.
No, he sucked.
It was bad. Now,
hold on. I have a tweet I want to bring up here.
Okay, please do.
I'm gonna need
the timeline is great, man.
I'm gonna need Devon here to read this tweet for our audio listening audience, because this one is an absolute doozy.
All right, let's go with the tweet from Markelle Fultz.
To your point, he came out and it was a 1-on-0 workout.
1-on-0.
And he couldn't shoot.
This is after the trade.
This was because he didn't work out until after they traded for the pick. He came out here and the shot was just really, really poor. It was really struggling with the shot. And I, in my very infinite wisdom, basically sent out a tweet that don't worry about the shot. I don't know.
Are you talking about the value of today's?
Yep.
Okay, here's Derek's tweet. Value of today's workout was about 80% medical reports, 18% interview, 1% performance, and 1% miscellaneous. Don't worry about the shooting.
And you guys tune in every day to listen to that guy's opinion. Clearly, you're all out of your mind, because that could not have been any more wrong.
Here's where he's wrong. Because I agreed with you. I was with you. My thing was everything that Derek said. Plus, he just got out of an SUV from driving from D.C. He wasn't on a plane. He drove from D.C. or Baltimore and got to the arena. Got to the practice facility, sneakers, shorts, let's go work out and let's get it done. Now you say, Devon, you're a basketball player. You should be able to go out there and perform. It's not nothing.
Yeah.
You have to jump out of the car. They said he was napping in the car and he has to do all the things that Derek's talking about. And I'm like, I don't care about this because I know what I saw at Washington. Yeah. And that was the basis of what Derek had tweeted out. So I agree with you.
I'll say a couple things in my defense. First of all, 99% of the time, what I said, I think is right. Or at least the right approach. You don't want to take what you spent a year at college scouting, what you spent years in high school scouting, what you saw develop over hundreds of attempts on in-game situations, and throw that away because somebody had a bad afternoon in the gym. I think for the most part, teams put too much emphasis on workouts. I do think when you have a workout, it is mostly so you get a chance to talk to the kid and get a chance to get their medical evaluations. But the one exception to everything I just said is when the jump shot has changed significantly. And look, Markelle Fultz at that time, his form hadn't completely broken down. It was different than it was in college, but it wasn't a disaster at this point yet. He actually had a pretty good summer league performance.
That's where I was going to go.
A couple months later,
yep.
And Kevin Durant was praising that hezzy pull-up Jimbo, which is exactly how he phrased it.
From the DMV area.
Yep. So it was different, but it wasn't a disaster. But where I will not let the Sixers off for is, I said in that tweet, a much more important part than the shot is a chance to talk to him. So you see that the shot is different. You have to dig in and find out why it is different. And that is where the Sixers failed.
Yes.
What else I will say is I've talked to a lot of people with Boston over the time, and he had a dreadful workout with the Celtics. He actually had a pretty good workout from what I'm told with the Lakers. And he was actually in play there with the second pick. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that they would go with Ball if Tatum did go number one. Yeah. But the Celtics, and they saw the shot. From what I understand, they were concerned about the shot, but they did not think his shot was irredeemable at that point. And the shot alone wasn't the reason why they passed on him. It was a contributing factor to it, but it wasn't the only reason why they passed on him and had Tatum ranked as a higher prospect. So I think there was still some belief within the Sixers, within Boston, that the shot would be brought back to where it previously was. Obviously, that didn't work out.
There's so many legs to this thing.
There is.
Because even with that, when you started to hear those reports coming out of Boston before the workout with the Sixers, because that's when the trade happened, right? Why did they do this? They have the number one pick. Why are they trading and passing up on the opportunity of taking Markelle Fultz? Well, because of exactly what Derek is saying. And then you go to the Danny Ainge piece. Do you want to mess with? And this is where a lot of people were upset. Why is Brian Colangelo, even at that time, making a deal, number one, with Boston because you're a rival, and number two, what does he know after working out this kid, after we heard some reports that he's trading and giving up on Fultz and is willing to take Ball or Tatum should they fall, or maybe someone else at number three if Tatum is off the board for Danny Ainge at that spot. And Martian says in the chat, so Devon and Derek, you guys knew about the shot before the draft and all that stuff? No.
I knew he shot terribly.
The workout was bad. The form and everything was still the Washington Markelle Fultz form. It was normal. He just had a bad shooting day from what we saw. And you already committed to making the trade, so there was not much you can do. And we can get into that about people saying you should have taken Jason Tatum at the top of the draft after you made the deal. You shouldn't have taken Fultz in the first place. We get into that on the other side. But for what it is right now, because there's so much to this story, we saw the workout. We still felt, hey, not worrying about it. I know the scouting, not only from Derek, the scouting from the team. You cannot ignore what you saw in the amount of games that he played against that competition. In on the West Coast for Washington and say that kid could not play basketball. And for the outlook of him being a third option or a second option for the Philadelphia 76ers, knowing that Embiid was the franchise, then you go with Ben Simmons and you team up him with his defensive prowess. Markelle Fultz had a nice defensive year from when he played at Washington because of his speed and playing in the passing lanes and getting in the open floor and finishing in transition as well. That kid was fearless for everything that he was doing. That's why it made sense at the time for the 76ers to do the deal. Whether it was for Tatum or for Markelle Fultz, it was fine for them to do it. Either one would have worked because guess what? They didn't have either player on their roster at that point. They didn't have that player with the skill set of Fultz or Tatum where you could pass on either. They decided to go with one. It did not work out, and that's why we are here having a What If Wednesday beginning with Markelle Fultz, who is currently, after 7 seasons in the NBA, and still very talented and young, a free agent right now out there on the open market. We have a lot more to talk about with the legs that go all over the place with this story, and we'll do so right here on the PHLY Sixers Podcast.
All right, first up, we want to make sure we tell you about Rite Aid, specifically about fall allergies and what you can do to help combat those. Fall allergies can begin as early as August and last in November. The main culprits are ragweed and mold. Other possible allergens include plants and dust mites, with pet dander and fur contributing as well. Allergic reactions occur when your body misidentifies a substance, such as pollen, as harmful to the body, and when your immune system releases histamines to fight off the allergens. These same histamines are also the cause of your allergy symptoms, such as a runny nose, itchy or watery eyes, or wheezing. That's why antihistamines, medication that suppress the amount of histamine in your body, are often the first line of defense to treating your allergy symptoms. Here's what you can do to get relief during allergy season. Sign up for Rite Aid reward emails at riteaid.com/rewards to receive email pollen alerts for your area. Use a dehumidifier. Shower frequently, especially at night after you've been out all day. Check pollen counts on your weather app of choice and keep windows closed and use an air conditioner. Here are some over-the-counter options that are available at your local Rite Aid. You can try a nasal rinse to help flush out your nasal passages. When symptoms flare up, try antihistamines that we talked about earlier. And in order to be proactive, 1 to 2 weeks before pollen allergies are expected to be high, try a nasal corticosteroid. If that's still not enough relief, you can always ask your Rite Aid pharmacist for recommendations on ways to get relief during allergy season.
And at one point, the future was very bright for Markelle Fultz. Very, very bright. And even after leaving Philadelphia, going to Orlando, they did pay him. And I'm sure while he was down there, he had a lot of shades to, block out that sun while he was there in sunny Florida in Orlando for the Magic. Now, for us, as we discuss him and we talk about Shady Rays, our great friends, while the summer is in the rear view at the moment, doesn't mean that the sun is just magically going to go away. No, the fall is still there. Whether it's for style and you want it to look good with your clothes in the fall because now you can wear a jacket with some shades, maybe a specific hat, however you want to style it, it's very good to do so with our friends at Shady Rays. Maybe it's you driving your car, blocking out the sun because it is still very sunny. It's a beautiful day here in Philadelphia right now. Get ready for the season ahead with our good friends at Shady Rays. They have you covered as an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. You can include myself, Derek, and Kyle, and Bree in that group of people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures, including just simply driving your car on a sunny day to block out the sun. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style for you. They probably have a style in your favorite team's colors as well, with the football team getting underway, baseball getting ready for the postseason, and your hockey and basketball teams right in front of you. Shady Rays is right there for you. We took them with us to Las Vegas, and I'm sure we'll have them at training camp when we go to the Bahamas in a couple of weeks. Shades ever go missing, don't worry about it. You take that unexpected hit. Don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. They have you covered. The most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. If you don't love your shades, exchange one for a new pair, and you're all good with a return worry-free within 30 days policy. There's no risk when you shop. The team always has your back with personal and fast support. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com right now and use code PHLY for 35% off polarized sunglasses. That's 35%. You can't beat that from anywhere. Try it for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. You won't be disappointed. All right, welcome back.
So I guess the next place I would pivot to is, what do you think that means with Ben Simmons? Because at the time, you selected Markelle in part. Like, again, this is assuming that Markelle works out. So if he works out and reaches the potential, not just work out like he stayed on the roster and was a role player, but worked out in that he became the player they thought they were drafting with the number 1 overall pick. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason behind that is, okay, Ben Simmons has these deficiencies. You can't really imagine him ever running a traditional pick and roll because he just won't shoot off the dribble. You don't have confidence he's going to shoot. Markelle can do all of that. You have the best of both worlds. Ben can push in transition. Ben can be that defensive force that he was capable of being. And Markelle could run a half-court offense because you could put him in a traditional pick and roll and just have him operate with a live dribble and go to work. Do you think that would have impacted Ben Simmons' future with the club?
I think it would have helped him out a lot. Now, the shooting may not have been J.J. Redick-like with Markelle Fultz, but there's so much more that is there. Having him handle the basketball, being that secondary option in the backcourt with him, I do think it would have helped out in that regard, helping out having another defender with him there, the shooting ability that is there. If Ben Simmons was reluctant to rise up for a jump shot, Markelle Fultz being that other guy with him, not only with his ability to create and get to the basket, but also shooting from long distance or even mid-range, I do think that would have helped out Ben Simmons. I do think that it would have helped out his confidence, because one thing that we know is that things wouldn't have been as glaring in the guts of the game where he did not. He overpassed where Markelle Fultz may have had the ball in his hands. As good as J.J. Redick was, as you know, and as many of you know out there, he was my favorite to watch outside of Embiid and Simmons, but he was limited to one thing, and that was the shooting. If Fultz was there, that would have been a perfect guy to help out for Ben Simmons' deficiencies on the floor, and taking some of that we highlighted and put a spotlight on Ben Simmons because of what he didn't do, simply because of what Markelle Fultz would have been able to do. So a lot of two-man game in the clutch may not have been Simmons. It would have been Markelle Fultz. While Simmons was on the floor for his defensive purposes, it would have been Fultz and Embiid running a two-man game, trying to figure out how to close and pick up a win for the Philadelphia 76ers. So I do think it would have helped him, because a lot of pressure wouldn't have been on him to do the things that you would have had to rely on later on. We saw it with Jimmy Butler. Now, the part of, can I do this with Fultz the same way the issue is there with Jimmy Butler of handling the basketball, that's a whole nother piece of it. So we saw a little bit of it, but there's also a different personality with Markelle Fultz and Jimmy Butler, when one isn't so strong and the other would have been more easier to get along with. Growing and building, the age difference is not as big there, where it certainly could have helped out and worked for them at the time. So I do think that things would have been much better with Ben Simmons and the Sixers because of Markelle Fultz's presence of being the player that you're talking about he developed into.
So and I actually think I appreciated Ben more than some people did, because his defense was that incredible.
I was arguing for him against the Washington Wizards before the series against the Hawks on a 4-point, 15 assists, 15 rebound win. And people at the time reaching out to me in my former spot. And I'm like, folks, can you focus on what he did well defensively, passing and rebounding, in this win where they're about to get rid of this series in 5 games against this bad team. Can we focus on that? I was with you, as you know.
I feel like I'm setting up a Stephen A. Smith thing.
Okay,
I like Markelle. However, I do think that Ben Simmons off ball would have presented so many problems for the Sixers in the half court. And specifically, it would have made, especially in the playoffs, so easy for teams to sit another defender in Joel Embiid's lap and take away that pick and roll and the driving lanes from Markelle. And you brought up the point, and I agree with you. I'm not sure Ben Simmons long-term would have been happy playing largely off ball in the half court. The first major domino effect here is I wonder if Colangelo and that regime would have been more willing to move off of Ben Simmons before his value completely cratered. And I think there are a number of mistakes the Sixers made during this era. And we're talking about one big one here. We brought up briefly another one in your cousin and the Mikal Bridges selection and trade and getting pretty much nothing from that. Obviously, Tobias, big mistake from that era. One of the other mistakes is letting the league scout Ben Simmons well enough that his value cratered. And obviously, the breakdown that happened after the Hawks series, exacerbated that. But there was always his value was decreasing even up until that point. And one of the things I give Sam Hinkie and his crew a lot of credit for is that they got off of Michael Carter-Williams before he lost his trade value. And I remember going to that press conference when they traded him and hearing some of the way that the media members reacted to how could you trade your point guard? After they traded Markelle Carter-Williams. Yep. And a lot of the media members are acting like, how could you do this? How could you reset the process? How could you reset the timeline on this rebuild? How could you trade away Rookie of the Year? You would have thought they traded away prime Michael Jordan. But I think they realized this guy was never going to be a starting point guard in the league. His value is way over what it should be. We need to cash out now. And I give them a lot of, it's one of the moves, along with drafting, obviously, Joel Embiid, that you give them the most credit for because they were ahead of the curve. And Brian Colangelo and his crew were so far behind the curve on Ben Simmons that it really hurt. And I remember talking to some people at the time of the Luka Doncic draft and asking if, because you don't know necessarily about the Mavs or the Hawks who did the trade with the Mavs, how they individually evaluate him. But theoretically, does Ben Simmons have top 5 draft pick value? And
that was 2018. And
could you have a scenario where you could trade Ben Simmons for a pick that would be like a Luka Doncic type player? And they thought he had that kind of value at that time. So you went from a player.
Well, he was an all-star. He was at least a one-time all-star at that point. Because he was drafted in 2016. He made the all-star team in year two on the floor because he missed the first year and he played. So he was, at least he was a budding star. Where the Michael Carter-Williams thing, I'm in agreement with you. I had no problem with that. And, I wasn't a big fan of the rebuild as it was, but when it came to him, hell, when they drafted Elfrid Payton before trading him, I was like, yeah, cool. Because while Michael Carter-Williams, who was also in the green room, he was right there with them. I was like, okay, cool, because I'm not the biggest fan of this guy anyway, so go ahead and do what you do.
So my wonder, and, it would have been real hard to trade someone that had that much trade value and looked like he was on that kind of a career trajectory. But the Sixers were in a position where they had so much of Ben Simmons' problems came from, the mental aspect of the game and the confidence of it. They had more information on that than anyone in the world. So if there's anyone that was going to be ahead of the curve of Ben Simmons' trade value is going to eventually, decline, and we should have no confidence he's going to be a jumper, it was the people in that room. And I think part of the reason that they were blinded is because for the Colangelo and the regime, Ben Simmons was their guy. He was their selection.
That's very
true.
How
they put their imprint on this organization, which they were especially sensitive to because the organization was defined at that point and still is, and will be until he retires or, God forbid, something else happens. The organization was defined by Joel Embiid. And I think they're hypersensitive to that. And Ben Simmons was their building block that was their credit. And if Markelle Fultz had worked out, would they have been more willing to maybe see the reality of the situation they had in front of them, see that he wasn't ever going to develop that jump shot, see that he wasn't going to be a good fit next to Joel Embiid because of that, and move on while he still had elite trade value? That's what I wonder.
That's fair. And you still at least had your other draft pick who did pan out.
Right.
Yeah. And it's an easier build. It's a more traditional fit because you have a pure point guard who can score along with Joel Embiid. So maybe with that move of Ben Simmons, wherever they could have sent him off to, would have worked out. And now you can build the team more to your liking of what he actually is, of what your team actually needs to be with a big man and a point guard. And now you do everything else there in between. So I agree with you on that one, that they were blinded by it. And after a while, but look, they should have still gotten to the Eastern Conference Finals at least twice during the run that Brian Colangelo was there. So with that, Ben Simmons was still a part of it. As someone said, I think it was Martian said, he had locked up Trae Young in that series. He did a hell of a job on Trae Young in that series. Trae Young is so good, he still scores. But
remember when Glenn started the series by having like 34-year-old Danny Green on Trae Young for game one?
I do. Yeah, that did not go well to start the series off as they lost game one at home. That did not go well at all. I understand, put a bigger guard, all that. But yeah, how about put the other big guy on him and let him do exactly what he did for the remainder of the series. But yeah, things could have gone certainly differently had that regime maybe looked to trade him a little bit sooner.
And it's just so much of a different starting point when you start off with a, pick and roll point guard, an off the dribble shooter as your second tentpole foundational piece than it is a player in Ben Simmons who just couldn't be effective in the half court. They tried running those snug pick and rolls year after year, and they'd talk it up every preseason, and it never got anywhere because it turns out when one guy can't and won't shoot, it's a lot easier to stop them from getting into the paint. Unless you're a complete freak like Giannis, and part of the complete freak of Giannis is having the confidence that even if I start off 4 for 11 from the free throw line, I'm going to keep attacking. Confidence that Simmons never, ever, ever in his life had. But it's just such an easier starting point, and you get the assets that you could have gotten, from trading Ben Simmons. And keep in mind, they still had max cap space available. They eventually gave it to Al Horford. We won't talk about that. They still had enough draft resources to trade for Jimmy Butler, and they still had a 10th pick in the draft that could have been that third option wing that would have tied everything together. And you do wonder, because again, that was a 2018 draft, right?
2018.
You do wonder because they traded the 10th pick in Bridges for Zaire and a future pick. And a big part of that was because I think they felt the uncertainty because of the Fultz miss that they had to accumulate assets so they could try to make that next big trade. Well, if Fultz had worked out, maybe they don't feel so much that they have to get into asset accumulation mode. They could have just taken the best fit, which very clearly would have been Bridges. There's just so many ripple effects from this one miss that you're still feeling today. And like I said, because I had one response on Twitter, why are you talking about this? Well, first of all, it's September. We have to find stuff to talk about.
And it's a what if.
But also, it's not just, all right, you're in Maxey, Paul George, and Embiid. You have a great trio. I agree with that. We've spent a whole lot of time talking about that. I think I picked them to win 57 games. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all. You just have a much longer runway to try to fill out the rest of the team, and you have much more resources to fill out the rest of the team. And you're not trying to do everything at the tail end of Joel Embiid's prime when there's so much injury uncertainty.
You would have been doing this 5 years ago when he was 25 and not 30. And look at some of the issues that he had in the postseason. Could Markelle Fultz have panned out in the postseason to pick up some of that slack where things would have worked out so much better for the 76ers and Joel Embiid? When we come back, we still have more to talk about with this whole thing that has legs to it, of course, with Markelle Fultz. He's still out there. We'll show you what his career stats look like, what his stats look like in the Sixers uniform, and so much more here on the What If Wednesday edition of the PHLY Sixers Podcast. And at the time, we don't know what could have fixed Markelle Fultz when things started to go wrong with the shoulder and so many other issues that he had. The man had a triple-double and couldn't shoot a basketball. He still had a triple-double, and it looked great, right? But maybe he needed to fix something. He's like, all right, what can we do? Let's go to Ace Hardware. Can we get something to kind of put this guy back together?
Do they have a jump shot guy?
I think they do. They'll pop a shot in their store, and you can go to Ace Hardware. You got a leaky pipe, bad jump shot. I don't know. Ace Hardware Home Services were around the block with everything you need to fix it, including the person to do the fixing. Like maybe Markelle Fultz at the time could have used a basketball court at his house to just go out back and shoot and fix things. Ace Hardware, the place for you. Air conditioning issues maybe as well. Got the person for that. Faucet, you said, let's fix that in the fall. We'll get that figured out. Got the person for that too. Now that it's become very annoying and you know that it has gotten worse and worse over time because you didn't pay attention to it when you needed to do it. From plumbing to heating and cooling, we've got you covered with trusted pros to keep your home humming all year long Ace Hardware Home Services. We're bringing helpful home to you, and the helpful you love from the store now to your front door. Visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at acehardwarehomeservices.com to get you started on your very next project.
I'm going to have to call them up and see if they can have somebody help me fix my Papa Shot, because Kyle is still well out in front of the lead, and I don't like that at all. So I'm going to see if Ace has a jump shot.
Ace Hardware.
We also want to tell you about Rugged Road. Rugged Road is dedicated to creating innovative and durable outdoor gear for adventurers who demand the best. Their products are designed with the highest quality materials and craftsmanship, ensuring they perform in the toughest conditions. Whether you're on land or water, Rugged Road gear is built to accompany you on every adventure. One of the cool features of Rugged Road is that there is their ability to always float upright, so you never lose a drink. They have a lightweight design. Unlike other heavy-duty coolers, Rugged Road coolers are incredibly light, making them easy to transport on any trip without compromising on performance. They're also incredibly durable, crafted to handle the toughest environments. Their coolers are built to last, ensuring they can keep up with any adventure. The coolers are guaranteed to keep contents cool for up to 7 days, but often much longer than that. And they're versatile, perfect for a variety of outdoor activities, from fishing and tubing to camping and tailgating. These coolers are designed to meet the needs of every outdoor or sports enthusiast. So gear up for your next adventure with Rugged Road coolers. Reliable, durable, and built to be used. Rugged Road is your ultimate outdoor companion. Head to ruggedroadoutdoors.com and use code PHLY for 10% off.
All right, getting back to this conversation, and for number one, for the person
Don't worry that he couldn't shoot. What an idiot. I can't believe they had me on here talking about basketball.
The number one thing that, again, someone said to Derek, why are you talking about this? We're talking about this not only just because of the what-if part of it, but because of where we are today. Yes, they have put the right team and assembled that together at age 30 for Joel Embiid, with Maxey panning out, now bringing in Paul George as a free agent pickup. But we're talking about this because of the things that, again, are the ripple effect of maybe you didn't have to do this. Maybe you would have an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, maybe a Finals appearance already. Maybe some other things would have been put together from the Fultz piece working out, trading Ben Simmons, getting more assets, Cale being drafted potentially, and being, again, a young player coming out of college at 22 with them at his age, going with them in that window of 25 for Embiid, 22 for Cale, maybe Fultz would have been 20 at that time. So the timeline for all of that going forward, and then the things that happened thereafter. Is why we are talking about it today, and it just simply makes sense.
And look,
it's what Sixer fans talk about.
Yes, and you bring it up, but like, what could have been what could the last 5 years have looked like if they didn't make so many mistakes? Legacies hang by a thread in sports, and especially in basketball. I bring this up all the time, but Allen Iverson, if that Vince Carter shot just comes up, 2 inches shorter than it went, Allen Iverson can be viewed very differently in this town as a player who underachieved most postseasons. That was the only time he made a second round, was that run, and it almost didn't happen based off of an inch or two.
Sure.
So when you start talking about legacies, looking at these what-ifs, these things that Joel Embiid had nothing to do with, they impact his legacy. So I think sometimes it's just useful to remind yourself of the context around this era of Sixers basketball. I think some of the mistakes from this era are useful context when bringing up to discuss Joel Embiid, to discuss the modern era of the Sixers, and to discuss legacy. That doesn't in any way let him off the hook. And if you go back, Kyle and I have written many things critical of Joel Embiid, specifically at the end of the seasons. Devon has been saying it as well. It's a little harder to, just search through the 97.5 airwaves, but they're out there. But it is always really, really important just to keep in mind how many weird, crazy things happen with this organization because they directly impact the legacy of one of the greatest players in franchise history.
So get ready, because we're going to have a few more. So if you don't like this one, you might not like some of the other ones that didn't work out either. Although you like this team, there's still a lot of question marks of if they're even going to get to the Eastern Conference Finals because of the NBA champion in front of them, the team up 95, looking at them in New York and what they could be as well, and fighting in the Milwaukee Bucks also. So you're not simply handing them an Eastern Conference Finals appearance or crown. They still have to get the work done. The point of it is, when you look at Denver, as we talk about them winning a championship, Nikola Jokic, homegrown, along with Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., you make a good trade with Aaron Gordon, things work out overall for you when you do things the right way and you have the right pieces and building the right way around your franchise player. Different type of player, but again, more pick and roll centric point guard than Markelle Fultz. A wing, whoever the wing is, working out that you draft, and so many other pieces, especially if you move on from Simmons like Derek has talked about.
And again, the best in their prime player. So I'm going to cross Harden off the list because I don't think he was in his prime when he was here. He's still very good and probably better than Jimmy Butler, but he wasn't in his prime. But the best, like, in their prime running mate that they could have had next to Joel Embiid was Jimmy Butler, where you could have had a long runway. And they didn't keep him. And look, a lot of people will blame Brett Brown, and those two didn't get along at all. The biggest barrier, because quite frankly, if any team is choosing between a non-Greg Popovich head coach and a star, they will side with that star almost every time if they have any real belief in them as a long-term piece. The Sixers didn't, and a large part of that was because they didn't believe that Butler and Simmons could work together long-term. I have no doubt that if they believed that could have been a successful relationship, they would have either found a way to make it work with Brett Brown, and I've actually been told that he would have played for Brett Brown under the right conditions, or they would have just fired Brett Brown and moved on. Like, you just don't pick a going to be harsh to Brett, a middling coach over a star player. It just doesn't happen.
And that's why we said a wing. So if you have Fultz with Butler and Embiid, and look, when I said wing, not just saying Kale, because quite frankly, if they drafted Kale and kept him, Minnesota would have asked for Markelle in that trade. So just saying that, right? All right. So Jimmy Butler comes here, and now you have Fultz, Butler, and then Embiid. You still have a trio
and whatever
of more
assets you could have gotten for Ben Simmons. Like, there's just like being desperate because Markelle didn't work out caused so many reactionary moves that they didn't really recover from until they drafted Tyrese Maxey. And again, because it took Maxey 2 years to really get onto the scene, you're now there's a very short window with Embiid and Maxey, which you're trying to make the most of, and you hope that they can. It's just you lost a lot of time.
All right. You ready, Bree? Remember when Jay-Z said that to Beyonce? You ready, Bree? All right, you ready, Bree? Let's get this Markelle Fultz stats up here and let everybody know. Here are his 76ers stats. First thing was, damn, he only played 33 games for the Sixers in the 2 seasons that he was here. 2 games for Markelle Fultz in the Sixers uniform. 7 points. Let's just round it out to 8 to be fair. 3 assists, 3 boards, shot 41%, and of course the big number because of the time that he missed, 27% because of the injury and all that. 27% just vaporized. Field goal percentage down, 3-point percentage down. Derek, he played just 33 games as a member of the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah. Look, there was so much strangeness in the first half of his first year and it was nobody around Markelle was truly confident what happened to the jumper. And if I'm being completely honest, it's one of the times where I think I have been most disappointed as a journalist, because there were so many people on both sides of the conversation, by the way, who it seemed like their primary goal was to defend themselves, not to put Markelle in the best spot. And I'm talking from people around the team. I'm talking about people around Markelle. It's like everyone said, this car accident that you're all witnessing in real time, not my fault. And that was probably the last thing that Markelle needed at that time. I'll give them some credit because I feel like, after like 2 months or so, once you got into the season, they changed course, and I think the messaging got a lot better. But there were just so many conversations behind the scenes where it just really seemed like everybody was focused on making sure you realized it wasn't their fault.
Yes.
And the organization was so defensive about it and so on their heels that it was tough, honestly, as both a journalist and as a fan. And I think a lot of fans were like that. And that's why when he finally came back and he got that triple-double and he got the standing ovation, I think people just wanted to be happy for him. And it was really, I was happy for fans and the way they responded. Because I do think, regardless of whether or not it was a shoulder injury that caused him to change his shot, or maybe he lost confidence and then tried to change his shot and then lost even more confidence and it spiraled, regardless of the root cause and what was actually the cause and what was the effect, that was an incredibly tough thing for him to go through.
Thing with him too is he never wanted to miss games. He wanted to keep playing. he didn't care. So when we were talking about Simmons and his jump shot, Fultz was one that did not care what it looked like. He knew what it looked like. He knew it wasn't the same, but he kept going out there trying to play through it. Let's just say that. He tried to play through it. And the teammates were great. They would always have to stand up for him because, Derek, as you said, the car accident was happening in real time. And guess who's getting the questions? Just like when a guy wants to be traded and he's not here at training camp. You know who doesn't want to answer the questions? The teammates. They don't want to answer that. But he's a young kid. They are veterans on this basketball team, from J.J. Redick to Robert Covington to whoever else is there, coaching included. They wanted to have his back at that time because he's still a young guy. Whatever happened, and he cannot shoot the basketball anymore. But he's still going out there, trying to help the team out and do whatever it takes to win while still trying to find that in real time, trying to get the car fixed from Ace Hardware in real time. And it just wasn't happening for him. So when he did get that triple-double, whether you're media or not, you just felt good for him that one good thing happened for him in the moment while he was out there playing, not only in front of the 19-plus thousand, 20,000 in the arena, but for everyone else also that he is exposing himself to on national television a lot of times because they were a big-time draw as far as national TV stuff goes, that was sitting there watching it, and it just wasn't good. Yeah. So to see that happen and then to see the trade come up, I was like, at the time, now as we pivot a little bit and we'll get to the Orlando part, cool. It needed to happen. He needed a change. They needed a change, and it just needed to happen. Was it too late? Probably, but we all saw it. He's playing, then they sit him down. He's coming back to play. They say he's coming back. He doesn't come back. It was just time when the trade eventually went down, Derek, that they needed to move on. He needed a fresh start, and they just needed to part ways.
Yeah, and it did come soon enough. And look, when they made that trade, you thought, well, that could very well end up being a fake first-round pick. And you were legitimately one jumper from Mike Muscala. Two, actually. He made two crucial jumpers in the bubble from Mike Muscala from that being a fake first-round pick. And if you want to talk about a ripple effect, if those jumpers don't go in, this would have gone really freaking dark.
Really bad.
Really dark. But you were able to trade him when you were still able to get at least a theoretical first-round pick. And a 21st pick doesn't have a ton of trade value, but you ended up hitting the home run of home runs with that 21st pick. But yeah, it was definitely time.
Jonathan Simmons also came back in that deal for Markelle Fultz, who I thought in the moment, because of what he had showcased off the bench, is a nice playoff rotation wing for the things that we had seen already.
He showed
James
Ennis
was here.
Too,
Yes, the San Antonio piece. He got paid with Orlando. Orlando wasn't all that good. Bring him here. Playing for a coach like Greg Popovich, the relationship with Brett Brown because of the San Antonio thing overall, and just him simply being a role player like he knows to be in a winning situation, thought it was going to work out with Jonathan Simmons as a rotational playoff piece at that time because they weren't asking a lot, but they just needed someone else outside of James Ennis to have a pulse in the playoffs on the wing and stop people, right? So there.
And I was, you mentioned it was time for a change. I was curious whether he would be able to refine that jumper or at least find a way to work around that lack of a jumper in Orlando where he'd have a lot less scrutiny. Bless you.
Right. And thank you.
He did a little bit. Like he had a 4-year run with the Magic where he was playing okay ball and he was able to get to his spots and score largely off the bench in limited, but that jumper just never fully came back. And he was never able to figure out a way to rework
it. It came back
mechanics.
in the mid-range.
It did.
The form looks so much better mid-range. He still has the hitch from behind the three-point line.
But to be sitting here and him not signed, like I thought we've said this many times, so I don't want to dwell on it too much. I did think he would find a taker.
Yes. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, PHLY. Thank you, Boots. Saying bless me as I sneeze during the show. Hey, it's live. Things happen. Speaking of Orlando and the 5 seasons with the Orlando Magic. Derek, 5 seasons with the Orlando Magic. Let's look at the stats. Markelle Fultz, 234 games with the Orlando Magic. He did average close to 12 points for the Magic, 4.8 assists. So let's, again, round it out to 5, 3.4 rebounds, 48% from the field. So that's up 7 percentage points with the Magic. Again, mid-range jumper back there, the form looking so much better. and 27% still from behind the three-point line. So getting to the rim, mid-range jumper, starting to, again, look like the guy at least that we know of with that. And, man, that speed, that explosiveness where he would get to the basket, still dunking on people. Stacy on Twitter, Quiet Storm 12, she loves her, man. So Markelle Fultz from his days here continues to root for him with the Orlando Magic. But, again, even when he got that 4-year extension with the Magic, you understood because they were still rebuilding.
Yeah.
This is a former number 1 overall pick. Let's see if it eventually comes back. He's in their building. He needed it. They needed it. He got the 4-year extension. He got about $50 million with that extension. Good for him. I'm still surprised, though, Derek, like you said, he's available and on the free agent market right now, even on a 1-year deal, which is if he signs before training camp, he's only going to get a 1-year deal. People still not have signed him. And to be perfectly honest with you, I thought he would have been by now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And maybe he doesn't want a minimum deal. You don't know whether or not that could be holding up. Maybe he's looking for the exact right opportunity, but I wonder if whether he's going to have to stop being a little picky because there just aren't that many teams who seem to be vying for his services. It is still how old is he? Or how young is he? He's 20.
I got it right.
What, he was 20. He was 19 in 2017.
He's 26.
So he'll be 26. Yeah.
He'll be 27.
So he's still
the season.
certainly got plenty of, time in his athletic prime. His shot, you expect, is what it is. But I did think he would find a role on a team.
Yes, especially at 6'4", the wingspan, the defensive things that come with him. I figured he would be on the roster right now over some of the other guys that are also still there. But we'll see. He's still very young. Things could work out. Injuries may happen at camp also where he may get a phone call. Should the Sixers, 15th spot, should they inquire, or do they have enough guard depth at this point where they don't need to do that?
It's not so much guard depth because I would love a 6'4"
at 26
athletic
by the way.
Guard to put next to Maxey. The non-shooting part is, I think, pretty close to it.
What's the difference between he and Chris Dunn?
I mean, I think Dunn's probably I think Dunn uses his tools defensively a little better.
He's more pure of a defensive guy coming out of Providence than Fultz was. His stuff developed as time went on.
Yeah. So I think Dunn's probably a better defender. And because of that, he might not, offensively, there are a lot of concerns, but his defense is borderline elite. So you make a little bit more, you will excuse the offense a little bit more, whereas Fultz just has, I'd say he's a good defender, but not an elite defender. And I think that difference is probably enough to make up for that.
Sean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think some team probably should take a look at Markelle.
Should the Sixers, though? Not yet?
I'd probably lean no, but you could talk me into it just because it would be a good story. And because I think if it works out, I do think defensively he would be a good piece. And I'm always looking for extra passers and shot creators and ball handlers. But the shooting, it's real tough to fit.
Sean Ford says Fultz has to get to the Chris Dunn or Dennis Smith Jr. route where they're out of the league but given a chance off the bench to show that they can impact winning without being a good shooter in the league right now. He might have to. You might be right. And the longer he holds out and finds whatever else he finds, whether he has to go overseas, I don't think he takes a G League kind of route there because he's still shown things in the Magic uniform that he can play in the league. I'm very curious to see where this goes. Let's go to Brian Pumper with the super chat. Can we confirm he hit a motorcycle accident injury?
Everyone I've ever talked to denies that completely.
I'm with Derek. Anyone that I've talked to was not a motorcycle thing.
Or BMX, for the record.
Yeah. No four-wheelers, no motorcycles, nothing.
Yep.
No bike. No all-terrain, no ATVs, nothing. Something happened.
And I think that was part of the problem. Because if you remember, he did not tell the Sixers about anything wrong with his shoulder until after they had found out that he was changing the mechanics of his shot.
Remember when we were at, what was that? Was it first training camp practice?
Oh, yeah.
And he was to the far side.
Yep.
And everyone was like, wait a minute. Why is his jump? Because you mentioned Summer League. Summer League, he looked fine. And then you see him in that first open practice that we had, and we're like,
there's one at Penn, right? Was it at the Plestra? Was it where?
No, I thought it was in Camden.
Okay, there was also one that was a scrimmage that was open to the fans.
Yes, but training camp had already started, and then they had the open practice at the Palestra.
Yep.
We walk in the door, they talk, all that. We're allowed to look, and you see him on the far basketball court because he's the number 1 overall pick. You want to see him. And you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why does that look so funky?
Right.
Yeah, that didn't look right. And then things happen from there. So many tentacles with this story that just goes so many different ways.
But going back to the BMX thing, part of the reason that I think the Sixers were so flummoxed, like I said, is because they saw evidence of him changing his shot before they had heard that there was any kind of a shoulder injury. In fact, they saw him working out in the training facility, and I guess he and the trainer didn't realize that there was motion cameras in the training facility.
And this was before camp technically starts. So folks, when you realize guys come back now, they're in there now before camp starts. So they're 2 weeks in the gym, 2-3 weeks in the gym. And this is what Derek is talking about.
And again, they saw this before they had heard anything about a shoulder injury. So I think that's part of why there was so much of a disconnect between the team and the player, because they just didn't hear anything about an injury. If it was and Markelle, to his credit, has always said there was never like a specific incident that caused my shoulder to hurt. If there was a BMX or a mountain bike type thing or a dirt bike type thing, look, I understand that in a lot of contracts that could void your contract, but at the very least, Markelle would have had a starting point of knowing this is when it changed, and that's just never come to light. There's never come to light where he is at any moment where he said, this is when my shoulder started feeling different.
And then they started to blame his personal trainer, Keith Williams. Everything started to go his direction and started to go so many other places.
Like I said, there was a 2-month period where it seemed like everybody, their primary goal was to defend their own ass.
No one wanted the responsibility of whoever screwed him up with this. So we both agreed that it was the right pick at the time. Before we get ready to do our world famous roll call, I wanted to ask you though, for people who look at it and say you still should have taken Tatum, can you explain why you don't take Tatum for relationship purposes?
Again, the condition to making that trade was that the Sixers would not take Tatum. So when they traded with the Celtics, it was known that the Celtics wanted Tatum, and if you were going to trade up, you had to promise you weren't going to take him. Theoretically, because the trade was executed before draft night,
you can do what you want.
Theoretically, you can do what you want, but that would be like the last trade you could ever make because nobody would ever trust you again.
Not just Danny Ainge in Boston.
Yeah. No, that would get out very quickly,
including agents.
And nobody would trust you from that point forward. So it would have been real tough. And Colangelo has always prided himself on being a relationship guy. Like legitimately during his introductory press conference, they brought that up over and over and over and over and over again, in part because Sam Hinkie was quote unquote not good at that. But that was a very big core part of his identity. That was a core part of how he approached being a GM. He was a politician playing GM, and that relationship being destroyed, he just would have never done. And also, and this is where I don't want to let them off the hook, and I know we got to get to a roll call at the end, they had Markelle Fultz rated significantly higher than Jason. I had conversations with people in the front office leading up to that draft, and they were openly questioning.
Well, I knew from you.
They were openly questioning whether Jason Tatum could ever develop into being a number 1 option on offense. And if he couldn't, they didn't believe that he would have been worth that pick. They did not believe in Jason Tatum. So I say all of that about you can't make that trade after making that promise, or you can't make that selection after making that promise. They also screwed up the draft eval as well because they did not see this coming from Jason Tatum at all. He was not only on to first prospect, I don't think he was second or third either.
And yes, he would have fit just fine with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And if you remember when the playoffs, the Sixers played the Boston Celtics in that first round, he had a pretty good first playoff run.
Oh, he did.
And he started off against the Sixers. And once they were done taking care of business against the Sixers, part of his point was, I'm never going to forget that these guys did not take me number 1 overall. I wanted to be number 1 overall. They did not take me number 1 overall. Forget business aside, where you don't do deals after having an agreement between 2 organizations, 2 front offices. He wanted to be the first overall pick, and he wanted to do that here in Philadelphia, and they did not do it. So he crushed the Sixers. He did so well. He is now a champion, a multi-time All-NBA player, a gold medal winner, all of that stuff. His path he's in a good spot, where unfortunately for Markelle Fultz, that is not necessarily the case as he is as a free agent. As Derek talked about, we want to make sure everybody sign up for the Die Hard program to go ahead and read Derek's story. We discussed it yesterday here on this show. Derek has written about it in written form at allphly.com. Sign up to become a Die Hard member to go and check it out on allphly.com to read the story about the lineups, non-Embiid lineups, how things are going to look. We discussed it yesterday. Derek wrote about it. If you enjoy his writing, please go sign up to become a Die Hard member, allphly.com. Read the story, and we're going to have a lot of stuff between Derek and Kyle when we get here for training camp, because there are stories abound with this basketball team as we get ready for the upcoming campaign. But that Tatum thing, there were so many people. You got to take him. You can't take him.
No.
You can't. And the part that you're talking about, if you knew that they wanted him, if your only fear was the Lakers taking Markelle Fultz and your fallback was going to be Lonzo Ball or De'Aaron Fox or whoever it is, you stay at 3 and don't give up the assets so you can.
No, they wanted Markelle. They very specifically
have just stayed there
and very desperately wanted Markelle.
But Boston wasn't going to take him.
No, but I think there was still some concern
fear
that the
because,
Lakers
and
could.
You said it, he had a good workout.
He had a good workout. They liked him. They liked Lonzo too. It wasn't. I don't think it was a foregone conclusion either way. I know there were some reports that they were leaning Lonzo at the time, but and I was still working for Draft Express at the time, so I was pretty involved in this draft process. It was actually the last one I worked at Draft Express for. But there was enough uncertainty that I understood moving up to make sure you got. And by the way, it's not only just the Lakers who could have taken Markelle at 2. It's any team that could have traded into that spot with the Lakers.
That's fair.
So I think if you were confident in Markelle, I understood the reasoning of wanting to trade up 2 spots to make sure you got the guy. It's just they missed on the pre-draft interview process. They missed on the evaluation of his game. They missed on the evaluation of Jason Tatum. They missed on being able to predict what could happen in the future, and maybe finding the warning signs of that. They missed in every which way.
One more before we go. Ask you this. Let's say they stayed at 3 and Fultz goes to LA. Do you go Lonzo Ball? Do you look at De'Aaron Fox? Do you look at anything else before just simply settling on Lonzo Ball? Do you trade back? Because that is also the draft where, I was heavily in the Dennis Smith Jr. conversation, and there were some other people. Was that Lauri Markkanen's draft?
I'm actually trying to pull up
I think that was 2017.
Right now,
and I wanted to say that was Lauri Markkanen's draft around 7th overall, where he was selected by the Chicago Bulls, but I could be wrong. I even had the Josh Jackson thing, so you said I was wrong about that one too. With the Phoenix Suns.
No, Josh Jackson he was a 4th pick.
That was 4th pick. Yeah. So I was right about that.
I was wrong about that.
Would you have gone Lonzo Ball, simply staying at 3, or would you have looked at Fox?
I'm trying to remember. I think my 3rd rated prospect in that draft, or actually I think it was 2nd because I didn't have Jason Tatum that high. I think Lonzo Ball was my next highest rated draft prospect. And the fit with Simmons wasn't perfect because they were both.
That's why I asked.
They were both transition point guards. I did think Lonzo had a chance to develop as a shooter, as unorthodox. As it wasn't. I think he ended up shooting like 37%.
Which he has
so far. Who knows how much longer
changed his form.
But I think he's ended up shooting pretty well. And honestly, Lonzo's been a pretty good player. Just a pretty bad fit next to Ben Simmons. And I'm trying to think. I know I had Ingram. Not Ingram. I'm sorry.
Ingram was
Isaac.
the year before.
I know I had Isaac in my top 5, Jonathan Isaac. And he's been injured a lot, but he was a heck of a defender this past year.
Would you have gone there at 3 or maybe just traded back?
Pretty sure if I remember, I think my stance at the time was just take Lonzo because it was the best prospect available.
It would have been
tough though.
Between Isaac and Fox would have been my other 2 choices.
The right answer is Donovan Mitchell, but he went 13th and nobody was really thinking about that.
No, you didn't know. Except for so was this the year that Miami had 9? At that year?
No.
Miami
okay. Had 14. They took Bam.
Okay.
That's when they took Bam.
All right, that's when they took Bam. Because I thought that I remember there was something with one of the trade things that was set up with the Sixers, depending on a team finishing in the top 10. And I thought Mitchell would have been one of those guys, or somewhere in that lottery where it was protected, and Mitchell with the 2nd pick for the Sixers. Or no, I know exactly what it was. It was trading back. Was it the Kings that had 2 picks in that lottery?
Yes.
It was the Kings that had the 2 picks at 5, and later on 9,
10,
and
Zach
10,
Collins,
and that's where it was. Okay, if you decide you don't want to stay at 3 and you move back, maybe somebody like Fox, and then later on you take a swing on a player like Donovan Mitchell to pan out and work out, and that helps out with your backcourt with Ben Simmons overall. Damn, there was so much fun stuff in there with those draft times. Because
look, because I see PHLY in here saying like, oh well, wasn't Mitchell a pick? Wasn't Markelle a pick? Go back and actually create a big board throughout. Every year, create a big board, and more than just like rank them. Like say like, all right, what I like to do is I give everyone a probability. Like they have this probability of being, making an NBA roster, this probability of being a starter, this probability of being an all-star, this probability of being a superstar, yada, yada, yada. And then 10 years later, or even 5 years later, go back and look at it and just see how freaking wrong you are all the time.
It's not an exact science, man.
Everyone's sitting here, they should have drafted Donovan Mitchell with the second pick when he went 13th overall.
No.
There was nobody in the world making that evaluation.
It was that 10th pick. Remember, they were talking about, should the Sixers trade and go back and get the 2 from Sacramento, because there was buzz that Sacramento wanted one of those guards. Yeah. And that's where it was the conversation, PHLY, of, damn, so maybe if they do go back to 5, De'Aaron Fox is pretty darn good. You saw the two-way ability with him with the defense that you and Kyle talked about the other day. And then maybe you do go. Maybe it's Zach Collins as a backup 5 or stretch 4. Maybe it's Donovan Mitchell as a projected guy who had more of a defensive profile with his offense, who's falling late lottery, and you take a swing at 10 like we've talked about in the past. That's why we bring it up.
Not to get too dark here to end this show.
Let's get dark, man.
They had a second pick in that draft. Do you remember who they selected?
The Sixers?
Yeah.
What number?
25.
That's when they traded in for Pasechnic.
Anhejs Pasechnic.
Yeah.
Right after that, all right, Caleb Swanigan didn't really pan out. Kyle Kuzma, Tony Bradley, Derek White, Josh Hart. Derek White.
That was more of a Josh Hart thing at the time because you scouted him. He's in your backyard.
Oh, I remember Derek White at Colorado. I liked him a lot.
Yeah.
Not like I thought he was going to become this, but I liked him a lot.
I mean more of the conversation here because people know Josh Hart.
No, we love the local kids.
And how can you pass on Josh Hart at that point as a player? But yeah, Derek White. I didn't know about Kyle Kuzma enough to say that he should have been a pick, but the Derek White or Josh Hart one, that's one you look at. Get ready, folks. Because this is a series that we're going to have going forward.
I want to say,
on What If Wednesdays.
Have a what if that you would like? Just let us know. Like we'll consider talking about that one.
Yeah.
We'll take suggestions on this. Drop it in the chat. Shoot me an email.
And we already eliminated Ben Simmons, kinda, because we just laid out the trading possibility early of trading Ben Simmons.
Or drop in our Discord. Bring it up in the Discord. Let us know in any which way. My email address is on my Twitter profile. If you want to email it that way, we will take suggestions too.
Yes, we will.
Because we don't want to make everyone like painful per se. Because it's a lot of times when you go to the what ifs, you go to the what if this had worked out.
Because it could have been what if he didn't hit those 2 shots, and you didn't get tired, and you know.
How about this? What if Joel Embiid doesn't break his foot a week before the NBA draft?
Oh, Andrew Wiggins.
That's dark.
Andrew Wiggins.
That's one
that
worked out in their favor. So reality is a lot lighter or a lot better. But that what if is dark.
And Andrew Wiggins did come to Philadelphia and have dinner with Sam Hinkie and the front office.
Snuck him into PCOM, the worst practice facility in the NBA.
What if Mustafa Shakur didn't bring Andre Iguodala for a workout in the back door? Same way for Billy King and company. There's a lot of what ifs. As Derek said, go into Discord, drop a few, maybe drop in the email, and we'll have these going forward of a series of what ifs. Could be good. Could be good. This one wasn't so great for the Sixers and Markelle Fultz overall.
No, it was not.
All right, folks, it's time for the world-famous roll call at the end of our show.
Started off with Winona and Val right there.
Hey,
from
Nona
the
and Val,
top.
what's happening? You got to put Jess in there with them.
Jess as well.
The trio.
She was farther.
The trio.
Winona and Val were just right there in the chat,
fair.
so I know.
Right.
I didn't mean any
ladies.
disrespect, Jess. Jess with the purple heart.
What
I
up,
hope you're
ladies?
feeling better. Rick Morris, PHLY, Bootzilla.
Boots.
Sean Ford, who is really happy that we spent a little bit of time dumping on Ben Simmons today. It happens every now and then.
It's always going to come back to him.
Malcolm Carrington, some guy named Devon Givens seems
Mal?
like a bad guy, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. Scrolling up, geez, it's just the same people. Yo QPHL. Don't think I've seen that name before.
What's up, Q?
Ethan, we got an Ethan in the chat. It's really just Spo Babby, not baby. Spo Babby.
Spo Babby.
Devon screwed that. What was the other one that you screwed up?
It was something like
it was a good one.
Yeah,
I can't remember right now.
You know, I'll say it too. I don't care.
Yeah. We brought it up for a while.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Let's see. Scrolling up, Derek Bodner. Don't need to pay him any attention.
Provolone John was in there. Saw Provolone.
It really is the same 5. I always give Kyle grief because, like, back in the day when I used to do these a little more regularly at the games, I would take notes, like, while you were doing your ad reads. I'd write people down.
When games start,
Martian, we didn't mention Martian
was there.
If you don't write it down in the middle, the same 5 people just repeat over and over in the chat.
Well, when the games start, people are now getting their last vacations in or they're watching at work and they can't jump in here. They're back at work. They can't do it. But you're watching and we appreciate it. And if you did and you want to tell other people, make sure you like and subscribe.
Provolone John, I know that I just saw him comment, so I want to give him a shout out because he's pretty much only commenting at this point, so I remember his name, so I say it on the air, so I might as well shout it out.
And I did it for you because you had so many other ones that I wanted to make sure we got.
Sorry, I don't always listen when you speak.
That's okay. That's not good as a teammate, but still. Either way, make sure you like, subscribe, sign up for the Die Hard program as well, allphly.com. And when you do, you'll get an alert that sounds like that. When the bell rings, it's 3 p.m. Showtime or post game. It's showtime.
Well, that's why you want to make sure that you hit the subscribe button. So that way, when we do post games and you're not relying on the fact that we're 3 o'clock every day like we are in the summer, you get a notification.
Folks, it's almost time. We're getting closer. We are getting closer to some,
I can't wait.
Some real stuff.
I miss basketball.
We got some previews that we're going to have to do before the season starts. At this time of the year,
normally I'm like, I just want an extra week or two of summer. Give me some time to either like clean up and do some home chores or get that last vacation. Now I'm like, because we have to talk every day, I'm like, can we please get basketball back in my life? I miss it so much.
Even when the other teams start maybe earlier for whatever games that they're playing overseas or something.
Yep.
We're going to be talking about those too. So, folks, we appreciate it. Kyle, again, off, and when he needed some time off, so he has to take some time off. I took mine last week. Derek took his the week before. Bree took hers. We all have to squeeze in our time off before the season gets underway. So, for Derek, Kyle, who's not here, but for Kyle, for Bree, we appreciate it that you always hang out with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock right here on the PHLY Sixers Podcast. See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.